We're going to start adult formation in about 30 seconds, but you're not interrupting us if you're wandering. I work with children. So welcome. There are not many of us, so if you want to sit closer, you can. I know some folks are out watching from home. Hello, Sarah. We know you're there. Small but enthusiastic group. We were waiting for Don to get back, so we can. No, we're joking. Okay, so good morning. The heat in this room is broken, so I'm going to leave my coat on. But thank you for being brave. So 2 weeks ago, when we were wrapping up our first discussion on Illumination, I asked sort of as a joke, so what do you want to talk about next? And I had introduced that series by saying that on Epiphany, the Magi followed a shining star, and on Candlemas, which is February 2nd, the church is full of candlelight, and in between those feasts, the lectionary is full of allusions to illumination. And so I ask, what interests you? What lights you up? You get it? And the answer was Candlemas, and I was so excited. I mean, I was rubbing my hands together. I love Candlemas. It is actually my very favorite service of the whole church year for all sorts of reasons. It comes at a time when the days are really short and cold. There might even be snow. We usually start outside, and there's this beautiful candlelit procession. Sometimes we sing one last Christmas hymn, because Candlemas is actually the end of the Christmas cycle. And there are just all sorts of fun traditions, like crepes and king's cake and Candlemas bells. So yes, Candlemas, let's talk about that. Then I got an email from somebody who had been watching at home, thank you, Nancy, who said we need to talk about the Song of Simeon. That's a key part of the Candlemas liturgy, it is. And she wrote, there's this religious Jew, Simeon, and he's holding the baby Jesus and proclaims him to be the Messiah to both Jews and Gentiles, and to be the light of the whole world. And the story comes from Luke, who is the great storyteller, and it links the Hebrew tradition to the Gentile world beyond, and that's what you need to focus on. Okay, so Luke is a great storyteller. There's a reason why our Christmas pageants are lifted almost verbatim from his gospel. He also gets things mixed up. He schedules the presentation of Jesus, which is Candlemas, the presentation in the temple, exactly 40 days after Christ's birth, which is actually the day a Jewish mother would have gone to the temple for purification if she had had a son. She would have needed to wait another 16 days for purification if she'd had a girl, because girls are gross, but good news and glad tidings for Mary, she had a boy. So 40 days later, she's going to the temple for the purification ritual. Luke has the presentation and purification happening at the same time, which just wouldn't have happened, but it's why we remember both those events at the same time. It's a liturgical and literary license. So Mary and Joseph and Jesus are at the temple for various reasons, and the old man Simeon declares the baby Jesus a light for revelation to the Gentiles, which is probably why the tradition of blessing village and church candles began. The presentation in the temple is a candle mass, right? Candlemas. And in many places, people bring candles from home or from the sacristy to be blessed. And then we sing the Nunc Dimittis, the canticle that Simeon sings. So now we've got the presentation in the temple, and the purification of Mary, and the blessing of candles. And as we acknowledged last time, there was probably a pagan celebration like on the early Christian calendar, that was very much loved by the local converts. And rather than throw it out completely, the church decided to keep it and put its own stamp on it. And in the British Isles, I'm going to guess that pagan celebration was Imbolc, which marked the coming of spring and the coming in of milk to pregnant sheep. So you could sort of make a connection between the baby lambs and the baby Jesus, or between the milk-filled ewes and the new Mother Mary. I don't know if they did, but we could. Harder to square would be the Imbolc tradition of watching to see if badgers and snakes came out of their winter dens. Oh, isn't it? Right. So that would foretell whether there was more winter or warmer weather to come. You see where this is going. It is no accident that Groundhog Day and Candlemas are both on February 2nd. The day falls right in between the winter solstice and the spring equinox, a day the ancient Celts considered the start of spring. So the days in the northern hemisphere are getting longer. Oh, wait, hello, Brigantia. Did I mention this was also the time the ancient Celts celebrated their deity of light? Brigantia, sometimes called Brig, was definitely co-opted by the Christians, and she became the virginal St. Bridget. So now St. Bridget's feast day is on February 1st, because we can't have everything happening in the same service. But we do have a lot. We've got threads of new life, redemption, purity, and light. And lest you think all those threads are getting a little too tangled, let's pull a few. First, when can we plant the crops? This was a really important question. A sunny day or a shadow, as Sankey said on February 2nd, foretells more snow, while a gray, wet day means the ground is thawing and ready for seeds. So, if Candlemas be fair and bright, come winter, have another flight. If Candlemas brings clouds and rain, go winter and come not again. Or, I'm a little groundhog, short and stout. February 2nd, I come out. If I see my shadow, they will shout. 6 weeks more of winter without doubt. Thank you. There's a poem for Imbolc, too. Candle, candle burning bright, winter's halfway done tonight. With a glowing, we are knowing spring will come again. So now, we've got a candle mass to celebrate Jesus, who is the light of the world. And we're doing that on the Feast of the Presentation, which is also the purification of the Virgin, which is also Imbolc and also Groundhog's Day. And we've got St. Bridget, the patron saint of milkmaids, but maybe also an iteration of Brig, the goddess of light. She's just leaving the stage. Are you following all that? Sure. Well, let me throw something else in. This afternoon at 1 o'clock, we'll be screening the documentary, The Philadelphia 11. It's about the first women ordained priest in the Episcopal Church in 1974. And we'll have at least one of those clergy folks with us. And I know that people are going to ask, I hope that people are going to ask, why did it take so long? So here I'm going to rely heavily on former student resident John Shelby Spong. Hold on. Yeah, he used to be a student resident. Lived right up there. And the Bishop of New Jersey, and also the nephew of my grandmother after her second marriage to Ernest Spong. So careful what you say. We used to call him the Bishop at my house, and he spent a lot of time around my kitchen table. So the Bishop has been accused of many things, like being too charming and charismatic and sometimes heretical. But he writes in really accessible and engaging ways, and if you haven't read his books, they are really fun. This one, Born a Woman, is subtitled, at least in this edition, A Bishop Rethinks the Virgin Birth and the Treatment of Women by a Male-Dominated Church. So Spong thinks, I am going to tie this all together, Spong thinks that the birth narratives in Matthew and Luke are a big part of the reason the church and Christian cultures have treated women so poorly. They introduced a particular idea of what a holy woman should be. Now, we all know the problem started long before Matthew and Luke. Women have been considered dangerous and unclean since Eve, and before. So how are we going to fit Mary into this story? And I say fit her in because Christianity doesn't start with Christmas, it starts with Easter. Nobody cared much about the baby Jesus until the resurrection, and then they have to find an explanation for all this amazing stuff that had happened. A virgin birth, as you probably know, was a given. I mean, Mary could have been 90 years old, like Sarah. That would have been cool. Or maybe she could have been 88, like Elizabeth. But there had to be something extraordinarily weird and special about the birth of Jesus, and a virgin birth is that. Even after the miracle, though, Mary has to visit the temple for purification. Generations before her had done the same thing, and I'm going to read from Leviticus. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelites, saying, if a woman conceives and bears a male child, she shall be unclean 7 days. As at the time of her menstruation, she shall be unclean. On the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. Her time of blood purification shall be 33 days. She shall not touch any holy thing or come into the sanctuary until the days of her purification are completed. If she bears a female child, she shall be unclean 2 weeks. As in her menstruation, her time of blood purification shall be 66 days. When the days of her purification are completed, whether for a son or for a daughter, she shall bring to the priest at the entrance of the tent a meeting of a lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, or a pigeon or turtle doves for a purification. He shall offer it before the Lord and make atonement on her behalf, and then she shall be clean from her flow of blood. This is the law for her who bears a child, male or female. If she cannot afford a sheep, she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, one for a burnt offering and the other for a purification offering, and the priest shall make atonement on her behalf, and she shall be clean." So, Mary is obligated by Jewish law to go to the temple for purification and to make an offering. Ideally, she would sacrifice a lamb. Remember on Imbolc, we're anticipating the birth of baby lambs, but that's actually just a coincidence, I am sure. But if a woman was too poor to buy a lamb, she could substitute birds. I want to thank Nancy Tennyson for drawing my attention to the thanksgiving of women after childbirth in the old Book of Common Prayer. When I say old, it's not really that old, but to be clear, it's not a thanksgiving for women, but of women, and it's not a purification exactly, but it is something. The woman, at the usual time after her delivery, shall come into the church decently apparelled, and there shall kneel down in some convenient place, as hath been accustomed, or as the ordinary shall direct. And the minister shall say unto her, and yeah, it's a thanksgiving, kind of like a purification. And this is the 1928 prayer book, the same one that was being used when the Philadelphia 11 were ordained. 2 other related tangents. If we were reading Matthew's gospel instead of Luke's, Mary, Joseph, and the baby Jesus would be in Egypt right now, hiding from Herod. Also, if Mary were a perpetual virgin, there would be no need for this purification ritual. And when I said that in Bible studies, everybody's like, what's a perpetual virgin? Nobody believes in perpetual virgins. Oh, I'm afraid they do. Luke didn't, but as recently as 1987, Pope John Paul II said, he cited this text. He confirmed this text. Mary was therefore a virgin before the birth of Jesus, and she remained a virgin in giving birth and after the birth. This is the truth presented by the New Testament text, and which was expressed both by the Fifth Ecumenical Council at Constantinople in 553, which speaks of Mary as ever virgin, and also by the Lateran Council in 649, which teaches that the Mother of God, that is Mary, conceived her Son through the power of the Holy Spirit without human intervention, and in giving birth to him, her virginity remained incorrupted, and even after the birth, her virginity remained intact. So, the mythology of Mary is as far-fetched, if you don't mind my saying so, as the mythology of St. Bridget, who could magically multiply butter in your larder. But let's back up. In Matthew, the Holy Family is in the midst of an epic escape, and in Luke, the whole Holy Family is just going about their business. They're going about their everyday lives, having their new baby circumcised on the 8th day in Bethlehem, and a month later wandering over to the temple in Jerusalem. They don't seem particularly worried about Herod. This is from the 2nd chapter of Luke. When the time came for their purification according to the law of Moses, they brought him up to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord, as it is written in the law of the Lord. Every firstborn male shall be designated as holy to the Lord. And they offered a sacrifice according to what is stated in the law of the Lord, a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. And now I'm going to read pretty much directly from Spong. The custom of dedicating the firstborn came out of the Passover tradition of Israel. Recall that in the Passover movement, all the firstborn were slain except the firstborn of the house of Israel who were spared. That's from Exodus. So the lives of the firstborn were to be lived in thanksgiving or Eucharistia. Later, the role of the firstborn dedicated to God was taken over by the Levites, who assumed the role of those people of Israel who were especially consecrated to the service of God. That's from Numbers. With the Levites in the role of God's consecrated ones, all others of the Jewish firstborn could purchase their lives back from God's service for the sum of 5 shekels. 5 shekels, you're free. The sum was paid at the sanctuary in the temple at a formal presentation ceremony. That's what's happening here. If it was paid, there was no obligation for the parents to bring the child in for redemption. This was the liturgical practice that lay behind what Luke called the presentation. I'm going to pull out another book. You're probably familiar with Amy Jill Levine. This is a book called The Light of the World. And she says this redemption should have occurred on the 31st day after a son's birth. We've already established they wouldn't have happened at the same time, the presentation and the purification. And it would have cost the father some silver coins. The father would have paid. We don't see any money exchanging hands, which may mean that Jesus' parents knew that his earthly life would be dedicated to God. Or maybe it just means they didn't have the money. We've already determined Mary couldn't afford a lamb, or, she had the sacrificial lamb in her arms. Maybe she didn't need one. Again, the presentation and the purification would not have happened at the same time, but for the sake of a good story, because Luke is a good storyteller, let's say the Holy Family wanted to save a trip to the temple because traveling with a baby, even the baby Jesus, was really rough. And it's on this trip to Jerusalem that they meet the priest Simeon. We're going to get back to that song of Simeon, and the prophet Anna. Or rather, Simeon and Anna see Jesus and recognize him as a light for revelation. Now, if you think back to the lectionary readings from last week, Simeon might remind you of Eli. Remember, Samuel is presented in the temple to the old man with dimming eyes, and it is the old man Eli who recognizes that Samuel has the gift of visions. Eli, though he was going blind, could see what Samuel himself could not. He was just a kid, and that was that the boy was being called by God. If he calls you, Eli says to Samuel, you shall say, speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. Now Simeon, and I'm reading from Luke, although I've printed it out, was righteous and devout, looking forward to the consolation of Israel, and the Holy Spirit rested on him. It had been revealed to him by the Holy Spirit that he would not see death before he had seen the Lord's Messiah. Guided by the Spirit, Simeon came into the temple, and when the parents brought in the child Jesus to do for him what was customary under the law, Simeon took him in his arms and praised God. So, you know that when we're in the parish hall, I always have a PowerPoint with art, and if I'm in here and I can't do a PowerPoint, I like to include poetry. So here's more Denise Levertov. It's called Simeon's Song, and it starts with the first 2 lines of the Song of Simeon, which we also sing at Compline. Anyway, this is Simeon's Song by Denise Levertov. Lord, now let your servant depart in peace, according to your word, for my eyes have seen your salvation. With certitude, Simeon opened ancient arms to infant light. Decades before the cross, the tomb, and the new life, he knew new life. What depth of faith he drew on, turning illumined towards deep night. So having seen the Christ child, Simeon can rest, by which I mean he can take his final rest, he can die. Here are the words from the Book of Common Prayer. Lord, you now have set your servant free to go in peace as you have promised. For these eyes of mine have seen the Savior, whom you have prepared for all the world to see, a light to enlighten the nations and the glory of your people Israel. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. Amen. In Luke, the chapter continues, and the child's father and mother were amazed at what was being said about him. And then Simeon blessed them and said to his mother Mary, "This child is destined for the falling and the rising of many in Israel, and to be a sign that will be opposed, so that the inner thoughts of many will be revealed, and a sword will pierce your own soul too." So Mary, whose soul such a short time ago was magnifying the Lord, will one day have that same soul pierced by grief. The Magnificat, the Song of Mary, is the canticle we read during morning prayer, and we also read it the third Sunday in Advent. And it echoes Hannah's song to God in gratitude for her son Samuel, the same Samuel who was presented to the old man Eli to be of service to God. That was the deal Hannah made. She seemed to be infertile, and here comes another miraculous conception. She prayed to God for a son, and she had one. And she gave that child to God as she promised she would. And Mary is going to give her son to the whole world, right? But it's not just Simeon who recognizes the Christ child when he's brought into the temple. It's also the old widow, Anna. And this is Amy Jill Levine again. She points out that Anna is not just any old widow. She has lineage. Like, nobody actually explains who Simeon is, but Anna is the daughter of Phanuel. We don't know who Phanuel is, but worth naming. And he is of the tribe of Asher. So Anna, the widow, has no children herself, but she's descended from Leah and one of the 12 tribes of Israel. And she fasts and prays day and night, never leaving the temple. She is truly a woman of God. And then she tells everybody about the child she has seen. So we've got these women. We've got Hannah, Mary, Anna, just to name a few, who are really vital to the story of God's relationship with humankind. Why has the church been so reluctant to include women in leadership? Come back at 1, we'll talk about that. But again, the Bishop Spong, would argue that the birth narratives of Jesus presented a mother meek and mild who sang with joy when she learned she would serve as a handmaiden to the Lord. And from those narratives, those pageants, if you will, the mythology of Mary and the unreasonable expectations set on all women bloomed. I'm not going to blame Luke. I'm going to blame Augustine. And here I'm going to quote myself, because I looked back at a paper I wrote when I was, 1989, 35 years ago. I was at a women's college, and I had no patience with Augustine. I was also reading a lot of Elaine Pagels at the time, so I'll paraphrase, but here's what I thought 35 years ago. Augustine wasn't the first in the Western world to separate earthly passions and goodness. I mean, Plato did that too, right? I have a very long explanation of that we don't need to hear. But Augustine certainly took it to the next level. He believed that Adam and Eve, when expunged from the Garden of Evil, left what was natural, that's paradise, to endure the unnatural world that is earth. So like creation care, this should bend you way out of shape. We are living in God's creation, which is basically a prison to punish us. In paradise, Adam and Eve had free will. They were free to eat whatever fruit they wished and free to obey God, but they got greedy, and as punishment, God took their free will away, leaving them slaves to bodily passions and to the pain of childbirth and to death.
Have we figured out whether that's the right thing or wrong thing
You mean, is Augustine right?
No. Is it right for us to not be in paradise, or is it wrong for us to not be in paradise?
Okay, so Sankey's question is...
This is a tough moment for me to have to...
That's okay. It actually might be better. I said in staff meeting this week, I'm just going to keep saying outrageous things until somebody else offers to teach. So leave it to me.
No, it's also the problem. You gotta let me go. Hey, you might want to, make sure you don't plan anything and put my time in, because this is here. You're awesome.
I'm sorry that the people, watching virtually can't hear these comments. But the question from Sankey was, have we determined if it was a good thing getting thrown out of the Garden of Eden? I mean, I think Augustine would say that we are ever yearning to be back in paradise. And there are ways that we can be more like that natural state that Adam and Eve lived in. For instance, we could live an ascetic life that is closer to the natural being. We could marry and be monogamous, and it's not really enough, but it's sort of like the natural state of things as long as women are subservient to men. You see why I did not like Augustine. Anyway, I blame him for everything. So here we are, sex is an unnatural act. Anyone conceived through this unnatural act deserves to live in the prison that is earth. Barbara.
Well, going back to paradise.
Let me give you this mic.
Going back to paradise, I think that we are still pursuing paradise on earth in so many ways, including, you can look at the ecology movement, but trying to get back to paradise. And I think that's just the ongoing call of God to us and to get us back.
Thank you. We'll circle back to all of this, and thank you for speaking into the mic. So, let me just say one more thing about the mythology of Mary. It includes an immaculate conception because, right, she could not be conceived by an unnatural act. And women, this again, mythology, this is not Luke saying this. And women must be subservient to men because it reminds us of that natural state. And I wasn't going to read T.S. Eliot today because he's so problematic in his own right. What I'm going to introduce anti-Semitism into this discussion. But his song has a sort of Augustian quality to it. So he wrote a song of Simeon. Lord, the Roman hyacinths are blooming in bowls, and the winter sun creeps by the snow hills. The stubborn season has made stand. My life is light waiting for the death wind, like a feather on the back of my hand. Dust and sunlight and memory in corners wait for the wind that chills towards the dead land. Grant us thy peace. I have walked many years in this city, kept faith and fast, provided for the poor, have given and taken honor and ease. There went never any rejected from my door. Who shall remember my house? Where shall live my children's children when the time of sorrow is come? They will take to the goat's path and the fox's home, fleeing from the foreign faces and the foreign swords. Before the time of cords and scourges and lamentation, grant us thy peace. Before the stations of the mountain of desolation, before the certain hour of maternal sorrow, now at this birth season of decease, let the infant, the still unspeaking and unspoken word, grant Israel's consolation to one who has 80 years and no tomorrow. According to thy word, they shall praise thee and suffer in every generation with glory and derision, light upon light, mounting the saints' stair. Not for me the martyrdom, the ecstasy of thought and prayer, not for me the ultimate vision. Grant me thy peace, and a sword shall pierce thy heart, thine also. I am tired with my own life and the lives of those after me. I am dying in my own death and the deaths of those after me. Let thy servant depart. having seen thy salvation. I thought it was going to be all badgers and butter and candles and Christmas hymns and pigeons, the presentation, the purification. How did we get to this dark place? I don't know. But one of the reasons I love Candlemas, or whatever you want to call it, is because it is so messy. I love that there's new life and death held in the same moment. I love that a man and a woman recognize the Messiah. And accuracy aside, I actually love that they do it on the same day that Jesus' mother performs an ordinary human ritual. Whether Mary or any woman needs purification doesn't matter. The fact that she's participating in this purification points to her humanity and to Jesus's too. And in that humanity, Simeon and Anna see the divine. What Augustine seemingly couldn't imagine, but Barbara can, is that there is beauty and harmony in the natural world. The baby sheep, the lengthening days, the fecund ground, the people working to build blessed community here. The earth should not be seen as a punishment, but a gift to care for. This is the portion of the psalm we read on Candlemas. It's from Psalm 84. How dear to me is your dwelling, O Lord of hosts. My soul has a desire and longing for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh rejoice in the living God. The sparrow has found her a house, and the swallow a nest where she may lay her young. By the side of your altars, O Lord of hosts, my King and my God, happy are they who dwell in your house. They will always be praising you. Happy are the people whose strength is in you, whose hearts are set on the pilgrim's way. Those who go through the desolate valley will find in it a place of springs, for the early rains have covered it with pools of water. They will climb from height to height, and the God of gods will reveal himself in Zion. How'd I do? Coming back home. So, one more thing from my pile of books. Paul recommended this last week, and then Bart reminded me of it. So, A Shining by John Fosse. He just won the Nobel Prize. 74 very quick pages. You can read it during lunch. He's Norwegian. Paul, will you describe, say what you said that made me go buy this book immediately.
Well, he is a Norwegian, and he has a whole series of books, and he's one of the more spiritual writers that has reached a kind of national prominence in world literature. Briefly, why I like this book is he's describing a mystical experience, and it is a mystical experience that I think most of us can relate to. And it's all done in stream of consciousness. In other words, you're all in his head the whole time this is going on. You could also call it a near-death experience of some sort. And when I read this, and it was over lunch, basically, yes, I didn't like it because I don't like that particular kind of writing, the stream of consciousness, but I couldn't get it out of my head. You know, I walked around for 3 or 4 days thinking about the experience, and I think that's mysticism. You can't explain mystical experiences. You feel them. They're in your heart in some way. So I'd recommend it, but be prepared for a surprise.
It's like Simeon can't quite explain it either. He says, now I can die. But if anybody wants to borrow this, it's hard to find in Chapel Hill right now. So,
It's at the library.
Oh, okay. But it's all checked out.
It's hard to find.
Neither Flyleaf nor Epilogue had it when I looked. The library had it all checked out, so somebody's returned it. Okay, so let me say one thing and then we'll get to Jonah. Because Sankey has a question about Jonah that we'll try to answer. How are we doing on time?
10:49.
Okay. The next 2 weeks, you are spared my voice. We have an incredible teacher coming in, Vicki Garvey. She used to be the canon for Christian formation up in the Diocese of Chicago. And I don't know exactly what she's going to teach on, but it's going to focus on illumination, probably from the Hebrew Scriptures. I don't know. She's amazing. Please come. Tell your friends. 1 o'clock today, the Philadelphia 11. I think we're going to have a big crowd.
Who was the priest or bishop that blessed the 11?
He's going to be here. That's the rumor. So there were multiple, but one was named Peter Beebe.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when the smoke alarm in my house went
Okay,
off, when the smoke alarm in my house went off at 11:30 last night, it woke me up. We had to figure out what was going on, but I couldn't get back to sleep. So I'm reading a book that I'm finding sort of interesting. Have you ever heard of the Book of Jay?
No.
I'll bring it to you when I finish the book.
I woke up in the middle of the night after a nightmare. I had gone downtown to get lunch at Sutton's, and I came back and somebody had taken all of the chairs out of the parish hall. And I only had 30 minutes to find all the chairs and set them up in time for the movie. And I was like, So, all right, so that was a sort of whirlwind tour of Candlemas and Groundhog Day. But do you have any thoughts about, as a member of the choir, do you have anything to say about Candlemas? Do you love it as much as I do?
I didn't grow up with it in my tradition, but I like it now. I'm intending to come. But I will say that we know the Song of Simeon by heart.
Yes.
Because we sing it every evensong. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those settings that has been set probably 150 different times by different, and so we probably know 25 different settings of the Song of Simeon. And so it's written on our hearts.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so Sankey, since we've got smart minds here, Sankey said, why do we read Jonah today? Why is it with this lectionary choice?
Who were the people of Nineveh? Why are we trying to save Nineveh? And Jonah didn't want to do that. And so he decided he'd jump on a ship and go somewhere else. And things happened, and the crew threw him overboard, and the whale got him and threw him back on the shore. So he said, okay, I'll go tell Nineveh, 40 days from now, you guys are toast.
They didn't see his shadow.
Right. Don says, Jonah didn't see a shadow. I actually think you're on the right track. I mean, they turned towards the Lord.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what happened. So that's why.
And Jonah got irritated at that.
Uh-huh.
With Lord, look, you put me through all these problems. You threw me. Yeah, I got swallowed by a whale. I came back, and now you're going to let the people of Nineveh go. I'm going like, well, my first question is, why should the people of Nineveh listen to a Jewish prophet? Question mark.
It's a big question mark. I was going to turn towards the gospel, and this is when we get the great follow me, right? So why would they listen? Why would they listen? I think there's a miracle in that.
Well, the miracle might be that they didn't want to go through the 10 plagues of the Egyptians. You know, the Egyptians didn't listen at all till the 10th plague. And that was the firstborn should die. Maybe they decided, let's do it. Let's get right away.
Just simple fear. Fear is a fear of the Lord. Any other thoughts about where we are in the liturgical year?
I think it's a call story, right? So in the gospel, the fisherman went right away. Mm-hmm. But in Jonah, he didn't go right away, right? He tried to escape first, right? But God got him in the end. And so those two call stories are really different.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Well, I don't want to spoil anyone's listening to the sermon if you haven't been to the service, but one of the core concepts that Keith comes up with is call narratives, which I thought was a great way to describe this whole thing about what you're called to do. So And that's what this is about,
Thank you.
the narrative of this call.
Yeah. Well, if anyone would like to borrow a book, please do. I encourage everybody to go watch the sermon from today. It's already streaming, and come back at 1 o'clock if you want to learn more about the Philadelphia 11. Thanks.